Hello, everyone. This is Joseph again. This is my presentation for the second theory for the first week. So the theory is called social network and social support theory. Some introduction about this theory. The powerful influence that social relationship have on the health has garnered great interest among both researchers and practitioners like me. Any understanding of the impact of the social relationship on health status, health behaviors, and health decision making can contribute to the decision of effective intervention for promoting health. In my case, so would like to know how to use this social support and social network to help the Chinese immigrants to increase their hepatitis B screening rate. For the social network refers to linkage between people that may or may not provide social support and that may serve functions other than providing support. For the social support is the functional content of the relationship that can be categorized into four broad types of supportive behaviors or acts. The first one is emotional support, involves the provision of the empathy, love, trust, and caring. The second one is instrumental support, involves the provision of a tangible aid and the services that directly assist the person in need. Informational support is the provision of the advice, suggestions, and information that a person can use to address the problem. The last one is appraisal support, involves the provision of the information that is useful for self-evaluation purposes. In other words, constructive feedback and information for our patient and clients. Relationship of social networks and social support to health. By meeting basic human needs for companionship, intimacy, a sense of belonging, and reassurance of one's worth as a person, supportive ties may enhance well-being and health, regardless of stress levels. So social network and social support can enhance the individual's ability to access new contacts and information and to identify and solve problems. The third one is people's social network linkage may help them reinterpret events or problems in a more positive and constructive light. I think it's very applicable to my topic on how Chinese immigrants interpret the hepatitis B as a chronic disease versus some bad luck. Back in China they have this kind of belief. So this is a conceptual model for the relationship of social networks and the social support to health. As you can see, the health network and the health support, they have very close relationship with the physical and mental and social health. Some empirical evidence on the influence of the social relationships, although there are some inconsistencies in the researches. For you today, would disagree with the House's summary statement made 2 decades ago. Although the results of individual studies are usually open to alternative interpretations, the patterns of the results across the full range of studies strongly suggest that what are variously termed social relationships, social networks, and social support have important causal effects on health, exposure to stress, and the relationship between stress and health. So the purpose of the whole study or research is we want to translate the theory and the research into the practice. That's one of the reasons I'm in this DMP program, which is by through the translational study we can apply those theory and the research into our clinical practice. So social epidemiological study have clearly documented the beneficial effects on health of supportive social networks. However, this observational study cannot tell us whether we can promote good health by strengthening social networks and increasing the availability of social support. So some interventional random control study research is needed to identify the most potent causal agents and a critical time period for social network enhancement. So social network and social support interventions. So this is what we want to know. We have several types. The first one is enhancing existing network ties. So by mean this, training of the network members in skills for providing support. So later in the slide we have 2 studies. Second study is we using the community health worker to increase the knowledge of those asthma patients to help them to avoid those asthma exacerbation. So training of the focal individual in mobilizing and maintaining social networks, systems approach, for example, marital counseling or family therapy. The second one is developing new social network linkages, by creating linkages to mentors, developing body systems, and facilitating self-help groups. Use of endogenous lateral helpers and community health workers. This is mentioned in the second study later. Identification of a lateral helper or community health worker, which I think is very important, and also can play a very significant role in increasing the screening rate among the Chinese immigrants, which is my topic of interest. So analysis of lateral helpers, existing social networks, training in health topics, and community problem-solving strategies. The third one is enhancing the networks through community capacity building and problem-solving. Identification of overlapping networks within the community, examination of social network characteristics of the members of the selected need or target area, facilitation of ongoing community problem identification and problem solving. Above all, we can also combine some strategies we just mentioned before. So some programs have combined the intervention strategy described earlier to maximize the impact of the program. For example, a program that enhances existing network ties and also forges new ties can benefit from the well-established social relationships and the infusion of new social resources. Health education and health behavior applications. So this selects a few slides. We're gonna introduce two studies, to see how they apply this social support and social network theory. The two interventions described illustrate how social network and social support concepts has been applied to practice. The first intervention uses the cognitive behavioral therapy we always use for those have patients with mental issues to increase social support. The second describes a social network intention using community health workers. The first study is called Enhancing Recovery in Coronary Heart Disease Patient Study. So we already know from some of the observational studies have consistently demonstrated that patients with the coronary heart disease who do not have the adequate social support are at high risk for subsequent cardiac mortality and mobility than are coronary heart disease patients who have very strong supportive social networks. So given this is a very critical issue, and also it's very is one of the leading cause of deaths in this country. So it's very urgent and is very needed to figure out how to using the social support and social network to help with this target population. From this study is randomly controlled study. So the participants are those who had a recent myocardial infarction and screened positive for depression, no social support. The intervention is based on the principle of the cognitive behavioral therapy, which was mentioned before. So for those people with no social support, professional therapists will conduct assessment and counseling session will be offered. And the intervention is a focus on changing the cognition and behavior of the patient in order to enhance their perceived social support. So participating in both individual and group sessions continue for 6 months until the patient report being engaged in a supportive social relationship and had achieved a threshold score measure of perceived social support. So for the study results, at 6 months follow-up among those who had been in social support at baseline and the intervention participating experienced a significantly greater increase in social support score than did the Euro care group participants, which is as a control group. This effect was attenuated over time, but some benefit remained up to 3 years after baseline. But unfortunately, this study has showed no relationship between this intervention and the mortality rate. So yeah, as we see on this PowerPoint, so basically, you had low point in the 4 years follow-up period. Did the intervention group experience fewer recurrent non-fatal myocardial infarction or cardiac death than the Eurocare group? So for the second study, we just mentioned, we used the community health worker, which is a lay health care staff, and ask them. After they receive certain trainings, we send them to the community to help those people who has asthma. So in this study, the community health worker were recruited from the community, being served by the project. So 6 community health workers hired by the project living within the target area and were either personally affected by asthma or had a close family member with asthma. So we recruit them because we consider them as an insider. Consider them have we call it insider perspective. So and better understanding of the culture and the working of the community. So for the interventional group is a high intensity intervention, and for the control group is a low intensity intervention. From the study results, after 1 year, the children of the family in the high-intensity group had a large decrease in the number of days and with activity limited by asthma, and in the number of the time urgent care services were used than did the children in the low-intensity group. So it works. So in addition, the children caregiver in the high-intensity group reported more improvement in quality of life than did those in the low-intensity group. So future direction for the research and practice. Both of the interventions described here illustrate the importance of the tailoring social network intervention to the needs and the resources of participants. Social network intervention are most likely to be effective if developed and implemented within an ecological framework that considers multiple levels of influence, as we read before, the individual level and community level. It is important also to evaluate both intervention process and outcomes. So application to my interest of study. So how to increase the hepatitis B screening rate among Chinese Americans by applying this social support and social network theory. So both social network and social support are needed to help Chinese immigrants to access their primary care service or primary care provider for hepatitis B screening. Chinese immigrants at high risk of hepatitis B infection who do not have the adequate social support at a higher risk for subsequent hepatic-related mortality and morbidity, which is what we want to prevent. So we can use community health worker and even the churches. They can serve as a very good source to provide social network needed among Chinese immigrants to acquire knowledge and to be motivated to access a healthcare system to be screened for hepatitis B. The application of social network and the social support theory will contribute to the quality of care. So when we increase, give them the knowledge of their condition and give them the information, we give them the treatment and follow-up, I think that's the part of the work we contribute to the quality care. So this will conclude my presentation. I use a different method this time. Hopefully you can enjoy, and also I'm looking forward to hear your comments and response, and everything is welcomed. Thank you. You have a great night.